It took us about, I would say, a year at least, because clearly, the script had gone through, multiple drafts and edits and so on. We started with a bunch of characters, and we looked at it and added a few, removed a bunch, and got to where we were really satisfied with the story as we ended up telling it, through the film. But there was also, getting the right, team. Of course, I partnered up with my good friend Jonathan Angelier. We've been working together as a team, director producer or producer director. Sometimes I produce for him, and he does the same thing for me, and so on. So we partnered up to make this film together, and then of course, once we understood what it would entail to actually bring this film to life, we created a fundraising or crowdfunding, I would say, a campaign to gather enough funds to make the film. And I thank all the people who basically contributed any amounts, not only from within the United States but also from abroad. I have a few people who really supported this project all over. And once we raised the funds, we started looking into finding the right DP, somebody who would not only basically use his or her skills to shoot this film with us, but also somebody who would believe and understand not only the meaning but also the message that we were trying to convey. So we got a nice DP, Mr. Jan Rimsha, who was a very talented cinematographer from Russia, living here in Los Angeles, and of course showed the script to a few trusted friends, filmmakers and non-filmmakers, just to make sure that to have basically opinions as to the subject matter we were dealing with, a very sensitive one about post-traumatic stress disorder in veterans who actually came back with you could almost say hidden wounds because they were psychological, but also post-traumatic stress disorder in Iraqis, civilians or refugees, these people who have suffered from the conflict, that took place in Iraq starting in 2003, and who still live, with that, who's, because their lives, have been literally wiped out, people who lost pretty much everything. And I'm not saying only the Iraqis, lots of American soldiers, also have lost everything, because when you have that kind of psychological problems, your life, becomes, very complex and very challenging.
Is it right for you?
So in the film Battlefields, I play a veteran who's suffering from post-traumatic stress, PTSD, and he's basically been separated from his daughter. His ex-wife is basically gotten custody of his daughter, and he very much is lost without her, because that was sort of the only person that grounded him and gave him a connection to life. With the consequences of war, as we know, is devastating in the human psyche, and we're more and more aware of these issues, veterans coming home with all kinds of mental problems, and veteran suicide is a major issue. So in this story, my character is basically suffering with whether or not he wants to end his life because he's depressed and he's lost.
Go faster, I haven't got all day.
is about war in Iraq and the results of that war. And you see the results in two families. One of a refugee from Iraq, Rashid, and one is of an American veteran, soldier Bobby. So you see the guy with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and you see the tragedy in each character's life during and after war. This film brings awareness not only of PTSD, but also of humanity in general. And you see that the message of the movie is peace. And I think it's always topical, especially now, where you see a lot of wars and there is no reason to kill each other. And that's what we wanted to say with director Anouar Smaine.
It was just officially selected by this wonderful film festival, Idlewild International Festival of Cinema, which is located in Idlewild, California. Founded by a number of very talented and very dedicated, very passionate filmmakers themselves, namely Mr. Stephen Savage, Steve Savage, and Will Wallace, and basically I had this great opportunity to work with both Stephen and Will Wallace many years ago. We worked on the Academy Award qualified short film titled Rain, and interestingly enough, it was a film about Iraq also, a film that we shot in the California, desert. So it was, Battlefields just got officially selected, and it will be competing in different categories at Idlewild. And we're very, very excited, simply because it's not only a matter of like having an official selection, but also being able actually to show this story, to different audiences, to the world. That's what I think, that's the aim of, any filmmaker or storyteller. There is, the part where, let's say if I were a baker, you get up really early, like in the middle of the night, people are asleep, and you're working on like preparing those, the dough for your croissants and for your baguettes, or, what I'm saying, all that stuff. And then, there is sunrise and people start showing up, to taste, what you've worked on all night. And it's the same thing for, for a filmmaker. You work on this thing, for years, literally, And when it gets officially selected and it gets, screened and it competes and so on, it really, it's very satisfying. So we're very, very excited.
It's wonderful. I mean, Idlewild Film Festival, it's a good little film festival. All I can say is that it's a short film, so you can never expect the level of success that a feature film can have. It may not be seen by as many people, but because it's a short film, hopefully it will circulate online eventually and people will have a chance to watch it. And because it's a short, it doesn't take long. It can take 15 minutes of your time, and you can see a nice story, I think, that resonates with many people around the world. Doesn't matter that they come from America or not. We know veterans, right? And almost every country knows war veterans. And we have to deal with the war veterans. We have to deal with them as people that are in need of our love and support, nurturing. They need to have an opportunity to help to basically evolve beyond the psychology of a killer into one of a peacemaker. And I think this film will help shape the dialogue. It will help give people a sense of how, remind people essentially how much we are shaped by wars. Our economies, our societies are being shaped by wars. We have veterans all around us. We can't forget them. We can't treat them as the future homeless, because so many societies have homeless people who are veterans themselves. We have to do better and treat our veterans with compassion and look to aid their souls from the suffering of what they've experienced. So Anouar approached me about this role, and immediately I resonated with the themes. My father is a veteran. He was in the Vietnam War, and so I have a certain understanding of the veterans' traumas. I mean, my dad was able to work his PTSD and his suffering out largely through making movies and art, right? Being able to tell stories that could, in a sense, influence society, but at the same time release a lot of his pain, a lot of his demons that he had suffered, as we know in movies like Platoon and Born on the 4th of July and Heaven and Earth. So I saw my father was an example of a successful veteran, but I know there are so many veterans who are dying from, daily in America from suicide. They say the numbers are somewhere, maybe 20 veterans or more a day are killing themselves since the Iraq and Afghan wars. And I think that really resonated with me, to say, how can we tell a story here of a man who's suffering with that, the guilt, but also just the chaos of war.
Give me any idea what I sacrificed?
Well, it was very easy for me to deal with Anouar. I think it was much more difficult for him to actually have to deal with the job of directing and acting. I've done it. I did it once on Greystone Park, the film that I made in 2012 about my experiences, but I played myself, so it was a little bit easier to act as me as opposed to playing a character and directing at the same time, because you have to keep an eye as a director. You have to keep an eye on your actors and their responses and the environment, and really have to be 360 in your psychology. So already that's the mentality of a director, but then to perform on top of it requires a lot of dexterity. And so I think he did a nice job with it. It was pretty tough, couple of days. It wasn't a long shoot. I think it was like 3 days. But by the end of it, the toughest part of the shoot was just the fact that LA, which is normally Los Angeles, is pretty nice, moderate temperatures, right? It's more like the Mediterranean in a sense. I guess Jordan might be similar temperature-wise, but LA doesn't normally get that cold, right? It never snows here. But we were shooting the final night in downtown by the train tracks, and it was so freezing. I think it got to like 40, maybe 40 degrees or something, which was just unseasonable for LA. So he was out there with his shirt and no jacket, and I'm in there bundled up, freezing to death. Both of us were just running into the car and to get warm, because we were not expecting it to be that cold in LA at night.
I played the role of an Iraqi refugee living in Los Angeles with his wife, who suffers from PTSD. His own wife actually carries these, as I said earlier, these psychological wounds. This refugee, this refugee's name is Rashid. He's from the Baghdad area, from Fallujah to be more specific. Fallujah was, on the news, you could say, most of the time as, the Iraqi conflict, took place, when it started in 2003. And so, he lives here in Los Angeles with his wife, and he drives a limo for a living, And basically, he is sent to pick up, a customer, and that customer turns out to be, a U.S. veteran of Iraq, whose life actually spirals out of control because of post-traumatic stress disorder. Of course, he doesn't know that. The character Rashid, or my character, didn't know until a conversation starts between these two characters. And as they begin discovering each other's backgrounds, tensions really mount between them, because simply because of he's an Iraqi, I was in Iraq, maybe I lost some friends, fellow soldiers, in Iraq. This is from the perspective of the veteran, and then the Iraqi was thinking the same thing. Oh my God, this guy, was, in my country. He's one of those, invaders. You know what I mean? So he may have killed maybe some Iraqis and this and that, and that actually leads to, a certain tension between these two characters. What we tried to do really is to focus more on the human element. We wanted to basically highlight the humanity that exists, in people, regardless of, their race, their faith, their national origin, or their culture. Here you have these two individuals, the Iraqi and the veteran, the U.S. veteran, who come from two different worlds, two different cultures, grew up in two different political systems, if you will. And they find themselves in the same car, and they talk, they exchange this, that, and yes, there is a tension, but there may also be some similarities between the two, and those similarities are what make us, or what makes us what we are, humans. You know what I mean? We're humans. Working with Sean was really a great experience, an enriching one. I presented, the script to Sean, a good friend who was an associate producer on this film, Amina, had basically worked with Sean, in the past, and so she connected us, and he read it and immediately liked it. He liked, I think, the idea, of these two cultures coming face to face. And we got together, actually, and we had multiple, read-throughs. And I saw, actually, that, on top of wanting to play the character, I saw that, he looked at it with passion, too. And I think, it's because Sean is somebody that cares a lot about the human condition around the world. It's true. I mean, anybody can look it up. You get on Google and you enter, like Sean Stone, and you'll see that Sean has gone to different conferences within the United States, but also around the world, to talk about culture and the plight of of humanity and people within different societies, different political systems should be collaborating and as opposed to clashing. So I saw actually that passion within Sean for the character, and so I immediately knew that he was, maybe a lead candidate for the part. And I'm saying this because we had actually done also a casting session in which, different amazing actors actually had auditioned for the part that Sean ended up getting. Of course, as I said, most of these great actors really delivered amazingly, during their auditions. But I think what Sean had on top of really delivering, as we did our read-throughs and so on, what he had is, I would say, the experience, that comes with being an actor, that's carrying this very complex character.
Well, I spent a little bit of time with this group called Save a Warrior, which is a very powerful organization doing great work. People should look it up, Save a Warrior. They do work in different locations across the country, but they were in Malibu, actually, the week before the shoot. So I went out there for a couple days to spend a little time with the vets and get a feeling of the work that they're doing. The training that they're doing is basically to reintegrate these veterans who are dealing with all kinds of traumas, war traumas, psychological issues of coming back from a military lifestyle to a civilian lifestyle. And the issue is like, how do you reintegrate the warrior psyche into the civilian psyche? So this Save a Warrior group is really, helping veterans. They do 3-4 day courses with them. They do all kinds of healing techniques and teamwork, trust building techniques to get the veterans, to feel like a sense of trust again, and a sense of humanity, basically, that maybe can be stripped away through the course of war. So basically, I spent some time with those guys, and that was just before the shoot. So I think that kind of got me into the psychology of the character, and again, just having never gone to war myself, being around people like my father, having seen his outbursts of rage, and when that gets triggered by interacting with someone who might, trigger that response, that memory of the war. So it was essentially a mixture of different characters that I had been exposed to in my life, and drawing upon those resources to inform my character.
The message is peace, and through cinema, we tried to show it and to motivate audience and people to think first before going to war, before killing someone, because there is no reason to kill anyone. And I hope people will understand it, I'm sure. And I can't wait for audience to see the film, because it's so beautiful, It's not just deep and festival, social. It's also beautiful, and it is a rare case, because usually people think that if I'm making a movie about war or some working class problems, it should be, as ugly as life is. But, I disagree with that. And I really want every project I make to be beautiful, and actors to be beautiful, handsome on screen, and the story to be told by really nice people and genuine people. And that's my goal, and I hope that people will see that in battlefields as well.
The message of the film is mainly to show that regardless of, as I said earlier, our origins, our let's say our race, our culture, our beliefs, religion or none, or not, we remain human beings, that have families, that maybe have children, that have spouses or wives or whatever, or husbands, you name it, and that happiness or suffering are not a trademark, let's say, of a specific country or a specific culture or a specific identity. It's basically a trademark of humanity. And that was actually the main idea. These two characters, Rashid, the refugee, and Bobby, the U.S. veteran, are very different because of where they're from. As I said earlier, their cultures, the political systems they grew up in. However, because of this tragic experience, of the war. They find themselves almost in like similar, circumstances. And I don't want to spoil, the film or anything like that. They find themselves in similar circumstances simply because they each had, families or have families that are suffering, as a consequence of, that specific conflict. And that's actually what I think is the message, regardless of, who you are, or where you're from, so on. There is humanity within you, and that is, what is important, treating others in a humane way, looking at others in a humane way, interacting and, with others in a humane way. And that's what's important. The fact that, we're able to look at people who, let's say, are different from who we are, that don't, let's say have the same color of our skin, that don't have our same, beliefs, that don't have the same customs, traditions, culture, you know what I mean? Look at them and understand that, they're different, yes, however, they're human beings too. They too have feelings, they have emotions, they have dreams, they have lives to live, they have families to take care of, so on and so forth. So it's like, the message in a nutshell is bridging a gap between cultures and basically highlighting, the importance of communication, dialogue, between cultures, societies, civilizations, and tolerating, others, as long as, of course, they don't mean to harm us, or, you know what I mean? So that's the main message of the film.
You've been to Iraq.
Of course, Sean's father, Mr. the respectable, Oliver Stone, one of the greatest, film directors ever, as far as I'm concerned, at least, made a number of war films. I remember having watched Platoon, when I was very young, with Willem Dafoe and Tom Berenger and so on, and that film actually stayed with me, because it showed the horrors of war. Okay, it did not glorify war. As I said, Sean carried, that passion, was on set of different ones of his own father's war films, and has an appreciation for the message that we were trying to convey.